What's happening, everybody? On today's show, a big weekend of games in SEC Week 8. We'll run down the matchups as we get Ole Miss at Auburn, South Carolina at Mizzou, and the headliner, Tennessee at Alabama. Locked On SEC starts right now.
You are Locked On SEC, your daily podcast on the Southeastern Conference. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And what's happening, everybody? Welcome into Locked On SEC. It's great to have you guys along. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more right now. New customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn today to get started. I'm Chris Gordy. Thanks for making Locked On SEC your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, covering your team every day. We got plenty to discuss today, so let's jump right into it. Let's go around the conference.
Boots out to the right. Intercepted. Makes the handoff. What a catch!
Around the conference.
And we start over at Mississippi State as Zach Arnett still non-committed throughout this week on who's going to play for Mississippi State. We know Will Rogers, quarterback, and running back Woody Marks got banged up 2 weeks ago prior to their bye week. Zach Arnett did say that Will Rogers and Jaquavius Marks remain questionable. He said, we'll see how the next couple of days play out, but we're very optimistic we will get a few guys back on Saturday. Mississippi State, of course, has had a rough start to their schedule through the first couple of weeks, but, some thought that maybe Mike Wright could get the start at quarterback. Guy who started a handful of games over at Vanderbilt last year, won some of those games in SEC action. So we will see who ends up making that start this weekend, but we'll stay on top of that, keep an eye out. But when we get into previewing that game, the Bulldogs traveling to Fayetteville, probably going to be leading Arkansas, because Arkansas, despite their losing streak right now, they have played some very close games, have been very competitive. But we'll see. If Will Rogers and Woody Marks play, that certainly changes the dynamic of Mississippi State and how they look. Over at Alabama, Nick Saban talking with the media. He announced Alabama offensive lineman Terrence Ferguson is battling back. He said he's doing better. He's practicing every week. He said, quote, I think he's getting better. I think he's closer to probably 100% this week than he has been. Those high ankle sprains are not easy to sort of get over. Ferguson has not seen the field in a couple of weeks. He played sustained the injury, rather, against Ole Miss a couple of weeks ago. So we'll see if Terrence Ferguson is back out there this week. But this will be Jalen Milroe's first taste of playing a bitter rival in Tennessee. And Nick Saban, of course, benched him in the South Florida game earlier this year, but ever since, Jalen Milroe's gotten better and better. And Nick Saban talking this week, he said Milroe has a better understanding of the expectation for him in terms of how he influences and impacts the offense through his execution. So I think that's developed a lot more confidence in him. I think that he has to continue to grow and develop his ability and be able to sustain that. He also said that, look, nobody can play perfect, so there's going to be some bumps in the road that you have to go through, but how you manage those, I think, is really important. I think that's something he's gotten much better at as well. So I think the key for Jalen Milroe is manage the game, make your throws, don't turn the ball over. Take a sack if you need to, throw a ball away if you need to, but turnovers could be very costly in this game against Tennessee. Of course, 3:30 Eastern from Tuscaloosa coming up this Saturday on CBS. Speaking of Tennessee, the Vols, their run game has really gotten going this year. And, look, they ran for 230 plus against Texas A&M last week. That was a vital part of that win. Josh Heupel saying this week, he said, I said it earlier, we've had a lot of different pieces up front, just the way the season has unfolded. We've had to play multiple guys on that O-line because guys have been nicked up. I feel like they continue to settle in, continue to grow, continue to get better. But our tight ends have also been really instrumental in that run game as well. Heupel going on to say we got 3 running backs that have experience playing their best football. All that pairs together, and obviously the quarterback is a part of that. I like the growth of what we've been able to do up there. So big challenge up ahead for Tennessee going up against Alabama's big defensive front. Heupel saying, look, their linebackers are fast and physical. Their front four is special, so a huge test for us in this one. But the balance for us offensively, we've got to be able to maintain some balance. I think the line of scrimmage on both sides of the ball is going to be really important in this game. Over in South Carolina, Shane Beamer, we didn't even talk about it on the show this week, but if you missed it, with the Gamecocks leading by 10 last week, with around 5 minutes remaining, they end up blowing it. Following the loss, Shane Beamer reportedly kicked something and broke his foot. Earlier this week, Shane Beamer talking about, he said, look, I don't really have a comment on that. It was a Gatorade cooler. It wasn't like I went in the locker room and just had some complete meltdown and went ballistic for 5 minutes of screaming and yelling and throwing and kicking things. I was just jogging off the field, kicked the Gatorade cooler, and unfortunately broke his foot. So Gamecocks, it doesn't get any easier. You're going to get Missouri this week heading out to Como. Mizzou ranked 20th in the country, and they've been tough to deal with. So Shane Beamer, don't break the other foot now. I mean, then we'll have to get you in a wheelchair or something for the rest of the season. But no, joking. It was a it's one of those things like you're already pissed off and you're already like dealing with pain from the loss, and then you go and inflict physical pain on yourself by kicking something and breaking your foot. Oof. Don't want to be Shane Beamer right now. All right, over at Ole Miss, Lane Kiffin and the Rebels, they are going to take on Auburn this weekend out on the Plains. And a couple of quarterbacks, and Robbie Ashford and Peyton Thorne played for Auburn, but not a lot of production from that standpoint so far this year. And Lane Kiffin was asked to evaluate the Auburn quarterbacks this week. He said, I think both guys in general, I think Robbie runs. There's this big difference. He said, I don't think there's this big difference with Peyton, because Peyton runs well too. He's really quick and fast, and he's played in a lot of big games over the years. And he's a really good player. So I know they haven't had the passing numbers that they would like, but I think this is a big challenge for us. I do think Peyton Thorne does really well and has played big in big games over the years. Tigers and Rebels, 6 Central from the Plains of Auburn on ESPN. Over Kentucky, they are dealing with a string of just bad penalties this season. Wildcats have recorded 54 penalties through 7 games so far. It makes them the 8th most penalized team in the country. They lose close to 70 yards per game due to penalties, and lack of discipline is what everybody kind of goes to when you're a heavily penalized team. On Wednesday, Mark Stoops addressed it, saying it's very disappointing. Really no excuse for it to have this type of penalties. If I'm not mistaken, the last couple of years, bottom line, we've either been 1 or 2 in the league in least penalized teams. And right now, we're the most penalized teams. We're just not doing a very good job there. Stoops went on to say some penalties are going to happen. Some aggressive penalties are going to happen. You know, those are the ones you're fine with, but some of it is just completely unacceptable. It's selfish and just not disciplined. We need to have some accountability there tied to the competition. So Kentucky, they get their bye week to maybe work on being the most penalized team in the SEC. All right, over at Arkansas, they got a big one against Mississippi State and dealing with some injury issues. Sam Pittman said this week he feels good about Chris Paul and Jalen Braxton playing this week. Chris Paul, linebacker, Braxton, defensive back, both missed last week's game against Alabama. He also said hoping defensive back Dwight McGlothern, who suffered a concussion against Texas A&M, will be able to participate in some non-contact drills leading up to this week's game. So we'll see what happens there. Pittman also said Cam Ball, who missed the Alabama game, has been practicing throughout this weekend and should play this weekend. Arkansas looking to avoid a 6th straight loss, but hoping to get healthy and get some guys back in there. Ahead of the game, Sam Pittman also saying, I know there's a big concern for us with the Mississippi State linebackers. He said, but I think Coach will have to point on what he thinks the attack is going to be. He said they're 2 outstanding linebackers, but I think they really showcase their abilities by what they're doing on defense. He said obviously do a really fine job with all their movements and things of that nature, but they're going to showcase those 2 guys because they're very, very talented, very, very physical. Jed Johnson and Bookie Watson, 2 of Mississippi State's star linebackers, combined for 83 tackles and 9.5 sacks this season. Over at Auburn, Hugh Freeze will have a lot of familiarity with the Rebels, taking them on here, and said plenty of similarities between the 2 offenses and how ideally they want to run things, both between Ole Miss and Auburn. And obviously Auburn is not executed at the rate that Ole Miss has this year offensively. But Hugh Freeze said the first things currently, they are noticeably different because they're obviously one of the top 10 in the country offensively, and we have yet to find any consistency. So I do think I've had offenses before that look similar to what they are doing there at Ole Miss. And lastly, over at Texas A&M, they're on their bye week, and Jimbo Fisher updating on some injuries heading into their bye week. He said safety Bryce Anderson, defensive lineman Walter Nolan, linebacker Edgerrin Cooper, and defensive lineman Albert Regis could all be ready for the South Carolina game. He said they're progressing with their injuries, which is really big for the Aggies. And just one more in here, LSU, they're dealing, or Omar Spates, their linebacker, dealing with a hip flexor earlier this season. In his first 2 games back against Ole Miss and Auburn, he had four tackles and 8 tackles respectively. So he's been back in there. Brian Kelly saying he's done a really good job for us in there. Very experienced. And I think the thing that he brings is athleticism, and he can flat out run. So Omar Spates back in there for LSU. Thank you guys so much for making Locked On SEC your first listen every day. Coming up next, we will get into previewing the games that are happening this weekend. That is coming your way in just a second. Well, first, I want to remind you guys this episode is presented to you by Betterhelp. Do you ever feel like your brain is getting in its own way? Like you know what you should do, what's good for you, but you just can't do it? Well, look, therapy is there for you. It helps you figure out what is holding you back so you can work for yourself instead of against yourself. If you're thinking of starting therapy, go give our friends at BetterHelp a try. It is entirely online. It's designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. You just fill out a brief questionnaire. You get matched up with a licensed therapist. And by the way, you can switch therapists anytime at no additional charge, no commitment there. Just make your brain your friend. Go check them out over at BetterHelp. That's BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/lockedon. That's going to get you 10% off your first month if you use that website. Again, that is BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedoncollege. And they are going to help you get back on the right track today. Give therapy a try. BetterHelp.com/lockedoncollege. This episode also presented to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Look, we've been telling you guys all season long, you've got, the college football season into the thick of it. NFL rocking and rolling, and you can get in on all the action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action. App is so easy to use. There's a wide range of betting options. You got spreads, player props, over-unders, and much more. I got the whole college slate for you this weekend. I got the NFL slate as well. Plenty of stuff happening, and you want to make sure that you're in on the action. Go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. Kick off the NFL, your NFL season or college season as we're into the thick of it. You visit FanDuel. FanDuel, the official partner of the NFL. All right, jumping back into it. Thank you guys so much for making Locked On SEC your first listen every day. Shout out to our everydayers. A reminder, every Friday you can catch us with our Locked On College football preview show. Find it on all the Locked On College YouTube channels, particularly right here, Locked On SEC's channel. Those guys will be getting you set for the entire weekend that is for college football. Of course, we're talking mostly just SEC here, and so I want to dive right into it as we get started previewing the games this weekend. 5 teams on a bye this week in the conference. Florida, Georgia, Kentucky, Vanderbilt, Texas A&M are all on a bye. So only 5 games to break down this week. And we're going to start with the one non-conference game. It is number 19 LSU versus 2-4 Army. And LSU is depending on what book you're looking at, 31, 32-point favorite. I believe it just went up to 32 on FanDuel. But LSU, 32-point favorites. It will be homecoming for the Tigers. This will be a 6:30 p.m. Central on SEC Network game. Tom Hart, Jordan Rogers, Cole Kubelik on the call. It's only the second meeting between LSU and Army. Army won the only other meeting 20-0 back in 1931 in West Point. Tigers being led by their Heisman Trophy candidate, Jayden Daniels, who continues to have the SEC's most prolific offensive attack. LSU leads the league in scoring offense, total offense, offensive touchdowns, passing efficiency, first downs, and third down conversions. Unbelievable what Mike Denbrock is doing this year. Tigers are number 2 in the SEC in total pass offense, rush offense, and they're currently riding a school record streak of 6 consecutive games with 500 yards or more of total offense. Probably going to keep that one going against Army this week. Daniels leads the nation in total offense at 401 yards per game. He's topped that mark 4 times this season. He's also number 1 in the SEC in passing touchdowns, and total touchdowns, and he's 7th in the SEC in rushing. LSU's offense, oh, by the way, also featured the nation's leading in receiver yards, Malik Neighbors, and receiving touchdowns, Brian Thomas Jr. The problem is for LSU, their defense is allowing 30 points a game and 423 total yards a game. This one is going to get ugly. LSU will win big, but Army's lone 2 wins came against Delaware State and UTSA. Now, UTSA is pretty respectable, but Army was shut out by Troy last week, 19-0. Look at the rest of their schedule, though. They only lost to Syracuse by 13. They lost to Boston College by 3, and they lost to UL Monroe by 4. I think LSU wins big in this one. Their offense rolls, but I think 31 is a lot of points. So I think we're going to lean to Army to cover the 31. I think Army scores some points with their rushing attack. Bryson Daly, he's that dual threat quarterback, and throw it and run it. I'm thinking something like LSU 45-17. I think Army covers the 31 because I think LSU's defense gives up some points. All right, next up, we've got Mississippi State at Arkansas, and this one will be 11 a.m. Central on ESPN. It is 3-3 Mississippi State at 2-5 Arkansas. They're both looking for their first conference win of the year. The Razorbacks coming off a 4-game stretch away from home, which they lost to all 4 SEC opponents, all of them ranked in the top 25. Arkansas can only lose one more game and still have a shot at becoming bowl eligible. Mississippi State, they're predicted to finish last in the SEC West. Of course, a whole new regime moving on with the passing of Mike Leach. But Arkansas's offensive line, they've taken a step back this year. Razorbacks were 7th in FBS in yards rushing per game last year. They are 117th this year. They're also 116th in sacks allowed, giving up 27 in 7 games. On the flip side, Mississippi State, question is going to be, is it going to be Will Rogers or Mike Wright at quarterback? Still been unclear throughout this week. Rogers dealing with that shoulder injury he sustained 2 weeks ago. Mike Wright, the transfer from Vanderbilt, has SEC starting experience. So we'll see who will get the nod this week. Of course, Mike Wright has more running ability if he ends up being the guy. For Arkansas, Rocket Sanders, he's only playing just 2 games this year with that nagging knee injury. He will be out this week. A.J. Green and Rashad Dubinion will once again carry the load. They've done a pretty good job filling in for him. And then another guy to keep an eye on is Arkansas defensive end Landon Jackson. He had the best day by an Arkansas lineman in 10 years last week. He was named SEC Defensive Player of the Week, had 11 tackles and 3.5 sacks in the loss to Alabama. Mississippi State, they've not been afraid of Fayetteville or to play in Fayetteville in recent years. Arkansas has just 1 win in Fayetteville against the Bulldogs since 2006. Look, we're going to lean Hogs because they are at home. I know they've been on this losing streak, but they cannot afford another loss. We're going to lean Arkansas minus the 6.5 at home. And then last one in this segment we'll get to, it is Mizzou. 20th ranked Mizzou hosting 2-4 South Carolina. It's the Battle of Columbia's. The Gamecocks are desperate to pick up a win after their brutal start to the season. They blew a double-digit lead last week to Florida. Their other 3 losses came against number 10 North Carolina, top-ranked Georgia, and number 17 Tennessee. One of the big problems has been their defense, which has allowed 41 points in each of the last 2 weeks. Mizzou, they struggled mightily the first couple weeks. People wonder if Brady Cook's the guy, but he has stepped up. He's now 3rd in the SEC with 2,000 passing yards, 14 touchdown throws, only 3 picks. They want to get Luther Burden going again this week. He was the nation's leading receiver a week ago, but he only had 2 catches for 15 yards in the win over Kentucky. See if he can get things going. The South Carolina secondary last week, they gave up 166 yards to Ricky Parasol, so Luther Burden maybe licking his chops. Missouri, they're 3-0 this season when they trail after the first quarter, which they did again last week against Kentucky. Could be interesting to watch the two running backs, South Carolina running back Mario Anderson and Mizzou running back Cody Schrader. They're both transfers that started their careers at Division II schools. Anderson spent 3 seasons at Newberry, and Schrader was a standout at Truman State. So kind of a cool story there, looking at those two guys being very productive SEC running backs. And like we said, it's the battle of the Columbias between Missouri and South Carolina. This one has been rather one-sided in recent years. Mizzou has won 4 straight, including a 23-10 last year to retain the Mayor's Cup, and the Gamecocks have not won at Mizzou since a 31-13 win during the 2017 season. I like Spencer Rattler. I think he can fling it, but we're going to take Missouri at home. We'll take Mizzou minus the 7.5 against South Carolina. All right, we'll get more into more of your picks here in just a second. But thank you guys for making Locked On SEC your first listen every day. We're going to get to the 2 biggest games in the conference coming your way in just a sec. I want to remind you guys this episode is presented to you by our friends over at Birddogs. Look, we told you guys about Birddogs all summer long. They were making you look good throughout the summer. Now let them make you look good as we get into the cooler months. They still offer those stretch khaki shorts designed to fit slimmer through your thigh and leg to give you that truly sculpted look. Their shorts do the exact same thing as Lululemon, but they fit way better. They got that cloud knit fabric that looks just like khaki but stretches so you get a way slimmer fit without having to sacrifice movement. They've also got the workout pants. They got everything for you up there at Birddogs. They got that anti-stink sweat-wicking fabric that keeps you cool and dry all day long. Go check them out. The best part about Birddogs is you can wear them to any occasion, whether you're playing golf, whether you're on a date, an evening out, hanging by the pool, working out, lounging, tailgating, whatever it is. Go to birddogs.com/lockedoncollege. When you go there, use our promo code LOCKEDONCollege at checkout. That will get you a free Birddogs water bottle with your order. It's birddogs.com/lockedoncollege for a free water bottle at checkout. You won't want to take your Birddogs off. We promise you. birddogs.com/lockedoncollege. All right, continue on here, Locked On SEC, and we got 2 more games we got to get into, so let's dive right into it. Next up on the docket, it is number 13 Ole Miss at 3-3 Auburn. And look, this isn't Hugh Freeze's first time facing Ole Miss since his unceremonious exit leaving the school. It is Lane Kiffin's initial visit to Auburn since he was a rumored candidate for that job last offseason that ultimately went to Hugh Freeze. The 2 coaches meet with their programs at very different stages. Lane Kiffin's Rebels are ranked 13th in the nation. Offense is a humming, while the Tigers, their offense is a struggling at 3-3, 0-3 in the conference. But look, we know that stadium can be rocking on a Saturday night. Hugh Freeze, of course, stepped down after leading Ole Miss from 2012 to 2016. Faced his old team 2 years ago when he was at Liberty. But Ole Miss has won 2 straight SEC West games since that loss at Alabama. They're still in contention for the SEC West. And the Rebels have not won back-to-back games over Auburn since winning 3 straight back in 1952, a game played in Memphis. Lane Kiffin said, look, we like breaking records. His team broke a 6-year losing streak in the series last year. Auburn Tigers broke the Ole Miss streak 70 years ago in the first meeting on the Plains, where Auburn holds a commanding 17-3 edge in the series. Auburn starting quarterback Peyton Thorne, as we know, has not looked great. Passed for 228 yards without a touchdown over the last 3 games. Robbie Ashford getting some playing time. Hasn't thrown many passes, but we know he likes to run it. Hugh Freeze made it clear problems go beyond the quarterback, so it's a lot of other issues. We have to consider everything, he said. Ole Miss, they're leading the SEC, ranked 11th nationally with a +6 turnover margin, while Auburn is 3rd in the league, +3. Ole Miss running back Quinshon Judkins, he grew up about 45 minutes from Auburn in Pike Road, just outside Montgomery, so he's looking to repeat what he did last season. Had a big day against Auburn, ran for 139 yards and 2 touchdowns. And Auburn coming off that embarrassing loss to LSU, getting outgained 563 to 293. Look, I'm going to go with the road team here. I'm taking Ole Miss minus the 6.5. I do think Jordan Hare will be rocking. I think maybe it'll be close at halftime, but I think the talent will shine through. I think Ole Miss runs away in the second half, and the Rebels win big, covering that 6.5. And lastly, it is our SEC game of the week. It is Jalen Milroe versus Joe Milton. Tennessee and Alabama, they can both capture division titles if they win out, but the Vols' future challenges include number 1 Georgia, and the Tide still has to play number 19 LSU. Last season, the 6th-ranked Vols snapped a 15-game losing streak in the rivalry with the 52-49 upset win over Alabama. Chase McGrath's 40-yard field goal got in as time expired. Neither offense has given much indication that this year's version will be a shootout. Defense is looking really good. Both teams rank among the SEC's top 4 in scoring and total defense. And Tennessee's offense looks very different from it did a year ago with Hendon Hooker. Joe Milton's been fine, but he threw for just 100 yards last week in their win over Texas A&M. Joe Milton has not been helped by the season-ending injury to wide receiver Brew McCoy. Heupel said Milton needs to correct a couple of fundamental issues and work on communication. Tennessee does bring a 3-headed rush attack in the SEC. The SEC's best and 6th nationally at 231 yards a game. Vols ran for 232 against A&M a week ago. The Vols are the SEC's only team with 3 players averaging 50 yards or more per game, led by Jalen Wright, who is 3rd in the league, averaging 95 yards per game. Wright coming off a season-high 136 yards. Both teams getting good at getting to the opposing quarterback. Tennessee is just better at protecting Milton. Alabama ranks 126th nationally in sacks allowed per game, giving up 31 compared to the 9 given up by the Vols. Tennessee has 24 sacks in 6 games, led by James Pierce and Tyler Barron. They are getting after it. And Alabama, Dallas Turner, his 7 sacks lead the SEC. Chris Braswell has 5. We are going to take Tennessee plus the 9. Those numbers are just way too big. But I think Alabama gets it done at home. So I can't go full upset here. I think it's close. I think it's somewhere like 23-20. Very low-scoring game, but I think Alabama gets it done at home. Jalen Milroe does enough. But give me Tennessee plus the 9. That's way too many points to be given up. Tennessee flopped in their first big road game of the year against Florida. Alabama, they fell in their first top 25 matchup, losing at home to number 8 Texas. But I do think that Tennessee will give them a fight. So we'll see what happens. And there you have it. Those are our picks. If you're looking to get in on the betting angle, we got Army plus the 32 against LSU. Mississippi State at Arkansas, we're taking the Hogs minus 6.5. Tennessee plus the 9 at Bama. Mizzou minus the 7.5 hosting South Carolina. And Ole Miss minus the 6.5 on the road at Auburn. And there you have it. Those are our picks for Week 8 in the SEC. That's going to do it for this edition of Locked On SEC. Thank you guys so much for making us your first listen every day. I'm Chris Gordy. Y'all have a great weekend. We'll talk to you on Monday. We'll recap it all with our winners and losers from the weekend. Enjoy the 5 games of conference football happening this weekend. We'll have a lot more teams off bye weeks next week to get into. And again, you guys have a great weekend. Be safe, everybody out there. And shout out to our everydayers coming back and checking us out every day right here on Locked On SEC.